This week on Christian World News, picking up the pieces of broken lives and shattered homes. See how the church is rising up to help victims of Hurricane Florence. Plus, as American Christians speak out for imprisoned Pastor Andrew Brunson, Turkey's president continues to hold him hostage, all the while taking his country down a radical path. And you saw him survive a Japanese prison camp in the hit movie Unbroken. But there's more to Louis Zapparini's story, and it will inspire your faith. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas. The Carolinas, well, they will be months recovering from Hurricane Florence. The storm lingered over North Carolina for 2 to 3 days, dropping more than 30 inches of rain in some places. Rising rivers caused massive flooding, forcing thousands from their homes. Many had to be rescued by boat or helicopter. More than 30 people died in the storm, and the damage is estimated in the tens of billions of dollars. Now, as you can expect, begins the long process of cleaning up and rebuilding lives. Joining us now to talk more about this is Anthony Lloyd, Director of U.S. Disaster Relief for CBN's Operation Blessing. Tell us about the level of disaster you are seeing, the level of devastation compared to perhaps past storms.
Well, obviously, I've seen impacts down in New Bern, and we've gotten reports from our team down in Lumberton where they're reflooding today. So it's really impacting heavily in those areas, and there's other areas, obviously, in eastern North Carolina that continue to get flooding even into South Carolina. So comparatively, of course, it's certainly at a level that maybe even rivals Matthew, which hit here 2 years ago. And the good thing is we're in close with our teams in those two locations right now.
Talk about the victims. Tell us how they're doing in all of this.
Well, when we first encountered folks, obviously they were really in need. We were able to provide commodity drops in locations. In both of those locations, we were able to minister to them, give them some initial hygiene kits and food and water and such, but it was obvious they've been hit pretty hard.
What is Operation Blessing doing to help the folks there?
Well, we're definitely working hard now in both New Bern and Lumberton. Our first thing we like to do is set up hot meals. We've got that going in both locations, and that's primarily what's going on in Lumberton because there's just areas that are still flooding, they're reflooding, and there's even search and rescue cases that are kind of taking place now. So we've got hot meals going on in both those locations. We've started our volunteer operations, and we continue to provide commodity drops. Those are getting timed based upon the need as it reveals itself to us in those two locations.
Yeah, it's been over a week now. Anthony, talk about the greatest needs that folks are facing and are dealing with.
Well, it's still just the basic needs. Many individuals, certainly in Lumberton, they can't get back. They're still evacuated. They can't get back to their house. And so a lot of times the hygiene kits are really what they're looking forward to first, and the food and the water, obviously. So Lumberton really needs the prayers of all of our viewers because it's a continued challenge down there. New Bern, we're getting access to houses, and we're starting to get out into the community to help clean out. We cleaned out somebody's house yesterday, an elderly couple. They just needed their furniture out. So we're really starting to have an impact and minister to them with our heart, with our sleeves rolled up.
Yeah, absolutely. Operation Blessing, you guys not just meet the physical needs of folks in the middle of a disaster, but you also give spiritual comfort to victims. Tell us about that.
Well, that's an important aspect because we can help lift their spirits just by putting our arm around them, praying for them, letting them know that God has people to do things when bad things happen. And so that's what motivates us, is being able to lift the spirits, to see somebody really respond to somebody that actually cares for them. So we focus on that. And it's a blessing to us as well, because many times these individuals, they just feel like nobody's been able to get to them. And so all of us involved in it, when you can put your arm around them, pray with them, let them know God loves them because we're there to help, it's a huge lift to them.
Sure. Folks who are watching here in the United States and around the world, what can they do to help you guys?
Well, we have a website, www.ob.org, that they can go to. They certainly can continue to watch all of the programming you provide updates, and they can pray for us, and any support they provide, we use directly to those that are impacted, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to do that.
Yeah, just the last few seconds here. How long, Anthony, do you think this recovery process will take?
Well, it's hard to say, and it always depends on the impact of the storm, but the reality is it's still, because of the flooding, impacting, so it's going to be months and months of work.
Okay, Anthony Lloyd doing great work on behalf of CBN's Operation Blessing. To all of your team out there, we continue to pray for them, and thanks for all you do for those folks in North Carolina.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going from one disaster in the United States halfway around the world. In the Philippines, a super typhoon struck the Philippines, killing 74 people. At least 40 are still missing. Thousands are homeless. CBN disaster relief teams are there also. They were among the first to provide much-needed help and comfort for the typhoon victims. My colleague Lucille Talusan has the story.
Jackie Lou Basawil is grieving over the death of her brother. A landslide killed him after Super Typhoon Mangkhut struck their village.
This is so terrible. My brother was asleep when the mountain suddenly caved in, destroying our house.
Jackie Lou's brother and aunt are among the 74 killed in the typhoon. In a nearby village, rescuers search for survivors and the bodies of those still missing.
In this very tragic time, CBN Disaster Relief Team is here, not only to give material help to the grieving and suffering families, but also hope, comfort, and God's love.
The villagers here are thankful CBN brought them rice, noodles, milk, and other items. It was also a great opportunity to share the good news of salvation to survivors and pray for them.
My grandmother said she was so delighted that you had to travel very far to visit us. Thank you so much. Our sadness was alleviated when you prayed for us. You reminded us that with God's help, we shall overcome this trial.
Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Benguet, Philippines.
Thank you, Lucille. Coming up, the American pastor held prisoner in Turkey, and how that country's president is taking his nation down a dark and very dangerous road. And welcome back to Christian World News. U.S. religious leaders here in the U.S. are urging companies not to do business with Turkey as long as American pastor Andrew Brunson remains in prison. Turkish and American business leaders will meet for an investment conference next week. Turkey's president is expected to attend, but faith leaders say he cannot be trusted so long as Brunson is in prison. The U.S. Commission on International Freedom has written a letter to President Trump expressing concern about the conference. American evangelist Franklin Graham told CBN News that Turkey is no longer a friend to America.
First, I would ask everybody who's watching right now, the Christians, to pray for Andrew Brunson. He's been falsely accused, and this is just a sham. He needs to come home. He hasn't done anything wrong. But Turkey, we have to remember that this is a country that is fast becoming a radical Islamic state.
Pastor Brunson faces another court hearing on October 12th, and officials are hopeful he'll be released at that time. Some say Brunson's imprisonment is just one more example of Turkish President Erdogan's growing antagonism towards the West. As my colleague Dale Hood reports, many believe he wants to revive the glory of the Ottoman Empire to Turkey.
The man who fashions himself as the new sultan of a revived Ottoman Empire has big dreams. And one of them could well be to build an Islamic army against the State of Israel. A Turkish newspaper closely allied with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his ruling party published an article in December entitled "A Call for Urgent Action." The Middle East Media Research Institute reports it's the brainchild of one of Erdogan's closest advisors. It looks like a blueprint for an Islamic military action against Israel. It calls on the 57 Muslim nations of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, to launch a joint military operation against Israel. Such an army would be mammoth. The OIC nations together make up more than 1.5 billion people. The plan calls for staging areas near Israel's border, from which an initial force of 250,000 soldiers would attack Israel. But is it a real threat? Former Turkish parliament member Aykan Erdemir told us he's skeptical.
I would say this peace has more to do with domestic politics than with foreign policy. Erdogan is a very complex politician, and when it comes to Israel, he compartmentalizes. On the one hand, Israel is often at the top of his targets. But at the same time, Erdogan also manages to continue bilateral relations of trade and cooperation.
After the Trump administration's official recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, Erdogan turned up the anti-Israel rhetoric, calling Israel a state of occupation and terrorism. He's also turned on an old NATO ally, the United States, especially over U.S. support for the Kurds, warning the Americans could get, quote, the Ottoman slap.
Erdogan continues to make threats against U.S., accusing U.S. to be kind of the mastermind of a global conspiracy alongside Jews to undermine Turkey.
Turkey continues to hold American missionary pastor Andrew Brunson on charges he was a mastermind in the 2016 coup attempt, a claim the American Center for Law and Justice, which is assisting Brunson, has branded ridiculous. Erdemir agrees.
We argue that Pastor Brunson is basically a hostage, and Erdogan uses him as a pawn.
Erdogan's anti-U.S. and anti-Israel campaigns have worked. Most Turkish citizens now believe the U.S. is the #1 threat to Turkey, just as an overwhelming majority are anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. Whether the plan for a Muslim army to move against Israel is a serious threat or not, the fact there are voices calling for such action is alarming. The fact that it comes from persons close to Erdogan, even more alarming. And those voices in the Islamic world are not likely to go away. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, you saw his physical strength and courage in the movie Unbroken. Now see how faith saved Louis Zamperini's soul. Welcome back to Christian World News. Louis Zamperini endured unspeakable horrors as a prisoner of war in Japan. That story is told in the 2014 film Unbroken, which ends with his emotional homecoming. Now comes the rest of his story. A new film in theaters now explores his struggle to overcome that terrible experience and the faith that finally saved him. Ephraim Graham has this first look at Unbroken, Path to Redemption.
If you're going to train for London, you have to do it right. Just go nice and easy, see if you can make it all the way around.
You think you can run a 4.7 mile again? I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't. I don't run to run. I run to win.
Louis Zamperini's real-life story
perfect. Moving on. Nice job, guys. Thank you.
is made for the movies. He was an Olympic distance runner, a World War II veteran, and a surviving prisoner of war.
You will never escape me. Wherever you go, I will find you.
Are you sleeping well? Are you having any night sweats or nightmares?
I just thought I'd be able to forget everything.
I want to go home.
There is no home.
His story returns to the big screen in Unbroken, Path to Redemption, a long-awaited follow-up to Angelina Jolie's 2014 epic war drama, Unbroken.
We have nighttime sky, right?
Harold Kronk directs this film, alongside producer Matthew Baer, who worked with Jolie on the first film.
The first film was a horrific, tragic story of his fight for his life, and the second film is his struggle to save his soul.
There's nobody more inspirational than Lou Zamperini, especially as portrayed in the film, with all of the terrible things that he goes through.
When I was a kid, I lived near Torrance.
Are you kidding me?
You still have the scars from where those runners spiked you?
Yeah, they got me pretty good.
And that?
Jack did that one.
This chapter introduces audiences to Louie's Cynthia.
Hey, would you like to?
Yes. What took you so long to ask?
The war is over, but are we seeing a war play out on screen in this family's life?
Oh, yes, we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
I
yes,
mean,
yes.
he physically left prison, but he's very much in prison in his head, and
Yeah.
it causes a lot of struggle between the two of them.
Yeah. What's nice about this, too, is that oftentimes you'll see war movies, and then they try and... It's very important to show the human element of war films so that people can relate to the experience that, let's be honest, most of us will never have or have never had. What's nice about this movie is that it's a human experience that we've all had in some form or some capacity.
He said that we were at war, you know, but it didn't feel like war, you know, not to me. It wasn't until I was stationed in San Diego. One day, this hospital ship comes steaming in. They were carrying all these guys, missing legs and arms. They were all torn up, blind, burnt. You know, that's when the war became real to me.
Luke, how would you describe this chapter of your dad's life and seeing it on the screen?
This is the climax of the story of my father's life. All that he went through before with the athletics and the Olympics and the life raft and the prison camp, the climax is when, after him spiraling out of control with post-traumatic stress disorder, that he's able to come to faith on that evening in October 1949 and change his life. It is the climactic part of his entire story.
With vintage cars like this pretty red Ford, the stage is set for the 1940s. A young Lou Zamperini and his wife Cynthia are coming here to the tent you see in the distance to hear from a young evangelist who has not quite made a name for himself on the national scene.
I do not believe that any man can solve the problems of life.
Evangelist Billy Graham, whose grandson Will portrays him in the film.
I believe that God is still healing hearts. I believe that God is still transforming lives.
I feel like if you close your eyes and don't look, you really think you're listening to Billy Graham.
That's the way it was when we first met with him. That was what Harold and I spoke about, was
we watched the screen test, and Matt couldn't believe he sounds exactly like his dad.
Yeah, it was just fantastic.
But there's a lifeline. Just reach out.
I knew the story from Unbroken. I knew the story from my granddaddy's tales. So I know the story pretty well. And I've seen the movie, and every time I see it, I've seen it about 3 or 4 times now, every time I see it, I'm crying.
That camp meeting also began a lasting relationship.
They had a great friendship, lasted a whole lifetime, 2 lifetimes really. And but it just, we're grateful how God brought these 2 men together.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Los Angeles.
And welcome back to Christian World News. A new school year brings thousands of international students to universities across the United States. Fitting in can be difficult as they adjust to a new language, a new culture, and academic challenges. But when locals roll out the welcome mat, strangers become friends, and the challenge becomes easier. Emily Jones tells us more.
More than 1,000 international students have enrolled at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia this fall. But across the United States, there are Chinese, Indian, Saudi Arabian, and other nationalities, more than 1 million in total, who've enrolled in international programs this year.
17 years ago, Dr. Kurnia Pho was one of those students, arriving with his family from Indonesia. Now he's giving other internationals a helping hand.
We have international students and scholars and their families that come from different parts of the world. They pursue educations and pursuing their future and their career.
Pho founded Global Student Friendship, a campus ministry supported by local churches. Today, he has invited over 100 arriving students to a welcome lunch.
They just arrived maybe a couple days ago, but with this sense of welcoming and giving them a cup of water, a plate full of meal, it's something that we'll feel for them. This represents something, speak to their heart, that these people care about me.
The friendships formed here lead to family outings and meals in American homes during the school year. It's something most foreign students don't experience.
88% of internationals are never invited into an American home, and actually even worse for immigrants. They live here maybe 20 years and they don't have American friends either.
Anticipating the needs of these arriving students, the Global Friendship Team also provides welcome bags full of household items, free rides to the grocery store, and even furniture for empty apartments.
When we came to Norfolk, we didn't had anything in our apartment, but from this organization we got a lot of furnitures like student desk, a dining table, couch.
Next semester, the ministry will open The Globe, a housing unit for 60 international students next to the ODU campus. It's just one of many opportunities to befriend internationals.
Imagine being able to find someone from almost any country that you're interested in and know that God brought them here for a reason. And so we Americans have this amazing opportunity to engage the world. So just reach out and give a little bit of time, a little bit of money, a little bit of food, and you have done what takes missionaries overseas years to accomplish. It's so easy.
Emily Jones, CBN News.
Thank you, Emily. Folks, there is a lot of bad news around the world, but for us here at CBN News, it's an opportunity to bring you stories like this, inspiring stories of folks who are doing ordinary things and resulting in extraordinary blessings for the kingdom of God. So I hope you're encouraged by all the stories we bring you here every week. Well, folks, for all of us here at CBN News, thank you so much for joining us. Until next week, goodbye and God bless you.